Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB Bikini Pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. We are hearing from an athlete who has been competing for 7 years now with 5 national shows under her belt, placing top 2 3 times before going to Universe and winning her pro card in 2021. She had the fire in her to go make her pro debut where she placed 6th, which is incredible for a pro debut. And after continuing to her next show as a pro and receiving last callouts, this athlete has embraced pushing through the hard moments, showing up for herself, and committing to a new plan to improve. So we're going to learn so much from her and her journey. I got a great episode up front and in store for you guys. So welcome to the show, Jackie Cheney. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Amazing. So happy to have you on.
Thank you so much, Les. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, well, that makes me happy as ever. I always love when people are excited to be on. I know it can be a cool moment, and it's always a blessing for me.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask, is there anything you do or think about right before your heel hits the stage?
Well, probably one of the things that you probably shouldn't think about is I always fear of tripping and falling. And it's like probably the last thing you should think about. But I always I don't know why, but I'm like, that to me, that would be like the most embarrassing thing on stage is to like get your heel caught and fall. And so that's like probably the bad thing I think about. But then I always remember, like, I always think like I don't know, it's hard to explain because not that I think I'm better than anyone or that, you are better. Like you just have to, I always tell myself, like, you are worthy of this moment. You are going to kill it. Like I just keep like amping myself up. Like you will get first call. So that's what I always just like tell myself, like, think about it. And so if it doesn't happen, it doesn't, but I just always try to amp myself up. Like you are worthy of this. You will do it, and then I think about tripping. So
a little bit of good, a little bit of keeping yourself humble. I see.
Yes.
Well, I love how you said you're worthy of the moment, and you have had quite the journey. And I think it would be best to start with your road to pro, as they say, since you started in 2015 and you only felt that you started really taking this sport seriously in the last 2 years or so. So can you walk us through how you've evolved as an athlete and maybe why or how the last 2 years have been different?
Well, so it kind of started like when I got into competing, it's weird because growing up, I never did any type of like cheer, dance, any type of sport because I was terrified to be in front of people. I always thought that people would be like laughing at me, making fun of me. I always had that such like an insecurity that I could not be in front of people. And so it was weird that I took to the sport. Like, I don't know, it just like was drawn to me. I saw a girl competing at a local gym I was going to, and she just looked crazy, like just so like ripped and insane. And I had asked her like, what do you do? And then she brought up like competing, and I had it in my head, I don't know why, that you would be, I'm like, dang, I kind of, because I love going to the gym, like I love lifting and all that, but she just looked phenomenal. And when she said, yeah, I'm going to compete, I'm prepping for a show, and I thought that it was like 80s. Like I in my head, I pictured like the scrunchy leg warmers, and you do like a fitness routine, but you like it's like, I don't know why I thought that it was more of like a dance type fitness routine, which that is what fitness is. But like in my head, it was more 80s. I don't know why, but I'm like, oh, I don't know if I have the guts to do that. And then she's like, yeah, it'll be fun. I don't know why I thought that. And so then I asked her who her coach was, and she gave her my information and all that. And so when I went to my first like posing practice, I was still under the impression, they told me bring heels, still under the impression it's going to be like a dance. I don't know why I was thinking that, but just like showing off your muscles. Had no idea about like the other end of it. And so when they started running me through the poses, I'm like, oh, this is completely different than what I was expecting, you know? And then, but I more so did it at that time. Like I just enjoyed it, and it was something that it was like out of my comfort zone, but I never, for the first, like, I don't know how many that it took, like 4 or 5 shows, like locally, maybe, the first like 4 shows, I did it more so just to do it really. Like, I think at the time too, like a lot of it was getting bigger locally, like everyone was doing shows, everyone was like, hashtag Instagram was getting started and hashtag like prep life, you know, it was just more like you do it as like a friend type thing in like this little solid group. And so just doing a local show, everyone was doing a local show, you know, so I never even thought in my head like I was good enough to go to nationals. And then I won. So it's now known as Wasatch Warrior, and that's where I did my pro debut at, but it used to be called the Salt City Showdown, but I did it on the NPC end, and it had always been a pro show, but only a pro show. And then they finally added like regional NPC. So when I was the first year that they brought in NPC, and I actually won the overall for bikini that year.
Wow.
And I was super stoked. Like, and then I kind of started thinking like, wow, maybe like my mindset still had not been where it is now. I still was almost kind of doing it. And this is me just being like honest. Like it was more just doing it because to be relevant, you know, like everyone else was like doing it, and I still enjoyed it, but I didn't have that. I don't know. It wasn't clicking yet for me. And I always thought, well, maybe I'll just stop after a little bit, you know, whatever. And then when I won my overall, I'm like, oh, like this is really cool. Like maybe one day I'll do a national show, but I'll just do it next year. Like I always would say that, one show a year, I'll do it next year. And so then I went back the following summer, and did another local show. And like, I think I went into it, oh, I won overall last time, you know, I'll just take it again, blah, blah, blah. Like I did get a little bit arrogant, and I actually dropped all the way down to 4th place. And it was a hard prep, just like personally for me. I was kind of seeing someone and it wasn't working out, and it was just really hard emotionally. And everything about the show, it just wasn't fitting right. And then when I got 4th, like I was crushed, and it was super embarrassing because I went from going from an overall to 4th place. In my eyes, it was like really embarrassing. And so I was backstage, and I am trained by Shane Hughley, and now I am. At the time I wasn't. And so I was just, and everyone had always said, like, I had been watching his girls go pro forever, and I still thought I'm not good enough to go to a national show, you know, let alone go pro. And so, but I'd always watch his girls go pro, and I was so stubborn because, like, especially here in Utah locally, like Shane's the guy, you know, like you go to him. I love Shane. Like we were friends before, but we were friends like on Instagram, and we were cordial to each other, but I just never wanted to be on his team because I wanted to be different. I'm like, oh, I just want to go my own route. And so, but just having him like be there in person, and then I could go pose with him and his wife Tiff, like I could go do these things just in Salt Lake right by me. I'm like, maybe I will finally like talk to him. I had been thinking about it for a little bit, and then after I got 4th place, I placed behind all 3 of his girls. And so I just broke down backstage. Like no one was backstage anymore, and I was the last one there, and I was just like so emotional because I just like was embarrassed, but I was also really sad. Like I'm like, dang, I wanted more from this, you know. And then with Shane, and like I also had like my mindset with like training and like food, everything was more just like an image thing, not necessarily negatively, like I didn't eat or anything. Like I still ate all my meals, but it was more just like, oh, I'm going to post this on the gram. I'm going to take this picture. I'm going to post to the gram, hashtag bikini, you know, like I never really connected to it. And then so after I had placed 4th and I was all sad, I'm like, I'm going to go see if Shane's still here. And so I had walked out, and like everyone had already been starting cleaning up. Everyone was leaving, and he was just sitting there talking to one of his athletes. And I just went up to him, and he turned around, and I just like instantly, I don't know what took over me. Like I just started crying, and I'm like, I'm just so upset because he watched me get my overall, and then he watched me get 4th with another coach, you know, and he's like, it's time to come with me. And I was like, okay. And so and then after like when me and him started talking, I don't know what it like something changed in me. Like it was like so much more enjoyable, and I had like a goal to focus on. And he told me, he's like, you can do nationals, you can get your pro card, we will get you your pro card. Is that what you want? I'm like, yeah. Like I still didn't think like there's no way, you know, like I can't get my pro card. And so, but I'm like, yeah, like I would want to get my pro card. And then like the more I started training, like I still love to post. I'm not like an anti like, oh, hating on posting, but it's just different now. Like I post because I genuinely want to, you know, like if I like the picture, I'll post about it. If I want to post about a workout, I really enjoy doing it. It's not so much to stay relevant with everyone else. And so just everything about like switching, when I switched with Shane, like just my drive was different. And I really like fell in love with like training hard and seeing the results. And it was crazy. And so we started prepping, and we technically started in August. Like that's when I joined him, August of 2019. And then we kind of went into an off season, more so just like a building season. And then we were going to do March here locally. We always call them the March, June, August, October shows. Like they have names like every like Viking challenge and everything, but we just call them the March, June, April show. And so we were going to do the March show, and then like hopefully maybe go to nationals. And so we were prepping for it and everything. And then the COVID hit, and just everything got shut down. And so we still kept prepping, like, even though we were doing at-home workouts, like I was still prepping. And I think that also, like, COVID kind of made me realize how much I loved it, because at that time you really could stop and no one would blame you, you know, because the gyms were closed, nothing was going on, you couldn't go anywhere. So like if you stopped training really hard, I wouldn't blame someone. Like you really have nothing else going on, you know. And so, but I think the thought of me stopping, that's like when I realized how much I loved like competing for it, and like the drive and like the dedication, because we just kept prepping. Like I bought like a gym, like it was in some lady's house, like it was this old school. It wasn't even the cable poles that they see now with the pins. It was a cable pole that like it rubbed against like metal, and you would put plates on it. And it was just this the oldest machine. I got it for like $200-$300, and it could do everything. Like you would just have to switch like the way the metal ran across the post, but it could do like lat pull downs and kickbacks and like a squat. You could do a squat on it. And so I just bought this thing for like $200-$300 and put it in my garage and kept prepping all through COVID. And then when we went to my first show, like this was the qualifier too, because I had lost my qualification because it had been so long. And so we were going to do the June show for a qualifier, and I got first in my class. I went for overall, and I didn't get overall, but I was still super stoked. Like I got first, and now I was qualified. And I met I met my friend Meg there, and we've been like thick as thieves ever since. And so it was awesome, like the experience. But it was crazy because that show was everything was still closed down here. Like they couldn't let you in schools, they couldn't let you have like big crowds anywhere. And so we went to this bar out in Salt Lake called Sky Bar, and it had like a stage where the DJ would put on his shows like whatever nights, you know. And then it had two levels. It's still open. Now it's open for bars again, but it had two levels and like little booths rather than seating. And so it was like such a cool experience, because that's where we held the NPC show, was inside this like nightclub. And so like you would be on the stage, and the warm up and the the backstage, they don't have a backstage. So it's an alley in Salt Lake between like another building. It was so hot in June. And so we had all of our pump up bands outside in this alley, like this concrete floor, not even floor, just concrete and like asphalt. Like we were like kicking back in asphalt and leaning up against the building, like doing kickbacks and warming up. And then you just went on stage. But like, it was cool because everyone, like the crowd wasn't in they weren't like, they had seating in the center, but everyone was in the booth. So like they were relaxed and they were like leaning back. It wasn't like super formal with like everyone just in, you know, section chairs. It was really cool, but it was such a fun experience. So when we got qualified, he's like, okay, well, let's go right into it. And I'm like, all right. And I was super nervous because I didn't even like know what to expect with the a national show, you know, and
Mhm.
I knew it was like heavy hitters. And so he's like, we're just going to keep prepping, blah, blah. And so we like went hardcore, and I went to North Americans and in Pittsburgh, and it was the craziest, like anyone who did North Americans during the pandemic, they know what I'm talking about. It is nuts. So it was nuts. So we were in our hotel, and we had to like get this text message. We had to sign on to this like text alert system where like you'd have to stay with COVID, and you'd have to wear your mask and all that. You'd have to stay in your hotel room, and then you would get a text and say, class A and B head down to the ballroom. And then
This is all because of COVID?
All because of COVID. And
Oh
so
my gosh.
it was nuts. And so they're like, class A and B head to the ballroom. And then so if you were in those classes, you would go down to the ballroom, and then you get everyone would get these same messages regardless of your class, like just so you could keep like, you know, and like up to date on everything. And then you get another text, and it would say classes A and B head to the bus, classes C and D head to the ballroom. And so the bus would take us to this giant, like in Pittsburgh, this giant circus tent. I'm not even kidding. It was like this huge circus looking tent, and it was all white, but it just like reminded me, I was crazy. And so they would bus us over there, and you couldn't take anything with you. I mean, I guess you could take your bag, but your coaches couldn't come with you, and no one could be there with you. Everyone had to the competitors only backstage,
Yeah.
and they didn't have a crowd. And so there was no audience. So it was literally like the judging panel, and then a couple seats, and then Angelica, Miss Olympia, she was there. It was crazy. Like when I saw her, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna like die. And so, but she was one of the very few people that were able to sit in there. And so it was like the row judges, and then her and maybe a couple of other people, and then it was just the tent wall. There was no like audience. That was pretty cool to me. I liked it. It was like a little bit less intimidating. But so when we got they bused you to the tents, and then it was so hot, and oh my gosh, like sweat was like dripping off of you. So they actually, like, the judges told us they're not going to dock us points for like messed up tans or like maybe like messed up hair. Like they're like, you know how it's the whole package.
Yeah.
Like they really weren't going to judge us now on the whole package, just like the tan, you know, like they're going to look more so at our conditioning and our posing and everything, because there was no way our tans, like everyone's tans they were getting ruined because it was so hot and muggy and humid in that tent. And there was like fans, but they were blowing hot air on you. And so, and it was a back to back. So like you went up on stage, they walked you out in a group of 6 or 7, walked you off, literally walked you right back on. You did your routine, walked you off again, and then they did first call outs. And then they did first call outs, then second call outs, then they walked you right back off, and then walked you right back on for finals, like all within like 45 minutes to an hour. Like our show was done.
That's awesome though, right? I mean,
I really actually really enjoyed
I like that
those
setup
types of shows. Yeah, it was because it took out like the anxiety of sitting all day long and like ruining your tan or, you know, peaking too early, whatever it might be. And so then when I got on stage, and this whole time still in my head, like I knew I looked good, but I'm like, these girls look amazing. Like I just totally thought, and I was okay with it. And I'm like, I'm going to get second call out, maybe even third. And I was totally okay with it. Like, I'm like, this is my first national show. And, so I was totally fine with wherever I landed. And so when they called us back on for first call outs, they called me out, and I like, didn't know what to do. I was just like sitting there. I'm like, what? And so then I like walked out with all the girls, and then I was on the very far end. And so I was probably in like 4th or 6th place. And I was totally okay once again. Like I was just on high, like I'm like, woohoo, like I didn't even care. And then they brought me to the middle, and I was splitting center. And there's a bikini pro, her name's Noelle Agnew. I want to say that's how I pronounce her last name, Agnew. I think that's how you say it. And so she was splitting center with me. And so I'm like, holy crap, like I like was not even expecting it. I'm like, this is insane. But I with the way they split it, thought maybe I was going to get second place, but they say you never know, like you can never just automatically assume. But it was North Americans was first place only, and so I'm like, oh, I hope I got first, but if I got second, like I'm okay. Like I was just on cloud nine. And so when they brought us back out, immediately they took us off and they lined us right back up. And then I ended up getting second, which was awesome. I was one away from my pro card at my first national show. And then I really started thinking like, holy crap, like this is like something that I can do, And I think once I took out all like the unnecessary things, like being like relevant and being popular and also all the distractions, I think kind of like taking away people who are negative in your life. Maybe they don't even know they are, but just kind of distancing yourself. I do realize now that I could have probably gone a lot further if I wouldn't have been so worried about like, oh, I still need to go out with my friends this weekend. I don't want to, if you just would have just like put my head down and really focus like I started doing with North Americans, I could have gone to that point a lot sooner in my regional shows. And I think that kind of like once I embraced, because I've always been more shy and like my small group of friends know I'm kind of like rowdy with them, but normally I'm very shy and I almost like to do a lot of things on my own. Like I love to go take myself out to cheat meals. I will go anywhere by myself. I don't mind. And so once I kind of embraced that and I realized like that's okay to be by yourself and just put your head down. Who cares what anyone else is doing? Don't stress so much about other people. That it just really brought it for me. Like I just felt so much like at peace, so much more at peace with it. And so then I'm like, okay, well, it's time to go, after North Americans. And Shane was like, yep, we got to do this. And so when we started prepping for Universe, and this was in 2020 Universe, and I wasn't expecting anything. Like I still, once again, you get that without realizing it. Like you almost get that like false sense of confidence. Like I was one away from my pro card. I'm getting it this time. Like you don't, not even to sound like I think I'm better than anyone. I just get that idea like, oh, I did it last time, I can do it again. I just kind of started getting that without thinking. So I was still prepping really hard, but I think I was just kind of more plateauing rather than getting better and better, like you should be for each show. Like I was just kind of like keeping my training the same. I wasn't really digging deep. And so when I did Universe, I actually ended up getting 5th place at that. And that was, even though I ended up placing lower at my next show that I'll tell you about, like going from 2nd to down to 5th place, that was my hardest loss, just because I'm like, dang, I'm going backwards, and it was okay. Like I was okay with it, but at the moment I was super bummed. And then, so then that was in Universe out in Charleston. And that was like definitely my hardest. Like, I'm like, oh, that sucks. Like I got off stage and I was like, dang it. Like I just was so bummed. And then I'm like, I got to go. I wasn't going to do USA's. It was in Phoenix at the time. And I wasn't going to do USA's just because I thought like, I'll probably just get 5th again. I'm like, I don't want to. And so, but I knew I'd regret it if I didn't do it for whatever reason. I just had that feeling. I'm like, I'm going to regret this. And so I started prepping for USA's, which was only, I want to say like at the time, because they were all mixed up because of COVID. I think it was only like 4 weeks from Universe or maybe 5 weeks out from Universe. And so I kept prepping. I had to prep all through like Thanksgiving and Halloween and all that. And when I did USA's, I ended up placing 6th. I went one backwards again. And so then I'm like, oh, but for whatever reason, the Universe was like the hardest, even though I got even a place lower at USA's, like it didn't sting as hard as Universe. And so I just kind of started talking to Shane, and I'm like, then I was at this point in my competing days, like now I like love it. I love the grind. Like this, I'm like, I am thirsty for this, like I really wanted it. And so in my mindset is, so if I would have I would have done my shows, went to nationals when I first started competing all those years ago, when I was more so doing it, to be relevant or whatever. If I would have done that same thing, I probably honestly would have quit, because my mindset wasn't right at in the beginning of my competing stage. Like I was doing it more because everyone else was doing it, and I still loved it. Like I still had that like love for it, but not how I do now. And so if I would have like went backwards those years ago, I would have quit because I just wasn't mentally strong enough to do it at the time. And so, but this time when I went backwards and I got sick, like it fueled me. Like, I'm like, oh no, like I am getting this. And so Sandy gave me feedback, and I needed bigger glutes, more defined shoulders, and just to come in tighter. And so I'm like, okay, like we'll do that. And so I just went into, and when I go into my off season, like I always mind my food. Like I always keep my 6 meals a day, my proteins, everything, but I eat big, like with my cheat meals, just because I knew I needed to gain weight, like, and I needed to put on the muscle. And so I embraced the fact that I was going to get softer. It's crazy how different my mindset was, like going into this in 2020, going into 2021 than I would have been in my younger, because there's no way I would have let myself get soft, like, oh no, I gotta keep up with everyone else, and so, but now, like at that time, I'm like, nope, I didn't even care. Like I embraced it. I love food. I didn't want to just like not eat it and not enjoy anything. And so I put on some serious weight with like all the food I ate, and just like the heavy training. Shane had me on this workout plan that was just insane, which was a good thing, but it was intense. And
what did that look like? Like what specifically did those changes look like?
So I kind of, with the food wise, like my protein, I really didn't up my food terribly, like other than my cheat meals. My cheat meals, I went ham. Like I'm like, give me the double cheeseburger. Like I would do a cheat meal like twice a week, sometimes once a week,
great.
and then sometimes twice a week. Yeah, and then Shane slowly tapered it back. Like it's cool because Shane, he just kind of let me. He always guided me. He still does. Like he still guides me. I still like follow his lead, and I don't just like say I'm doing this on my own. But he kind of lets me have that freedom, because he knows that I, like, if I need to put on size, I need this food, and so he knows that I'll like come back in, and he knows I'll train hard, so he just kind of lets me have my freedom. And so, but my protein, I only upped like my balanced meals, like the 6 meals a day, I upped those like by an ounce. So instead of I was doing 4 ounces every meal, I did like about 5, a little bit over. If there was a little bit more, I just ate it. But my like morning and night, because I live out on a farm, and so we have all the chickens that you can imagine. There's like 40 of them. And so they would just lay all these eggs. So every morning and night, every day, when I went into my off season, all the way up until I started competing again. So like I went to the off season in December, and then I started coming out of it in like about like, I don't know, I'd say like March-ish. And so I had about like a 3.5, almost 4 months of like solid eating. But every night I would eat 6 egg whites before I went to bed, and then I'd wake up and I'd do 6 egg whites before I went to work. Like I was like pounding these egg whites.
Wow.
And so it was insane, but I ate a lot. I gained, I got up to, I think about, before I started cutting, like when I first started competing, and I know the scale, like I don't want people to think that the scale matters, but this is just like something that I was proud of, because it was solid muscle with a good mindset of like food is fuel,
Mm-hmm.
And when I started competing, I weighed, I put on a little bit of muscle from the extra protein that I initially started with the plan, so I started putting on more weight, but it was lean weight. But I started out at like I'm 5'7", and I started out at 117, 118. I was pretty little. Mm-hmm. And then I always kind of kept it within like the 120-ish, 125 range. And I could never get past the 130. And then the show with how much, like when I was in my off season, how much I gained solid weight wise and lifting heavy. Like I would so that was the food, the weights, they were like just lots of sets of them. Like I would do, instead of just doing 3 sets of a workout, I would do 4 to 5 sets, and I would do reps between 15 to 20. And I would just lift as heavy as I could. Like I was just like progression overload, like trying really hard to like, and I focused more so on like deadlifts, good mornings, and like hip thrusts. I was really trying to bring in my tie-ins. And so that was like my workout like regimen. Like I just increased everything in volume and like amount of reps. And so when I was coming out of my off season, going into my second year of doing national shows, I was at 145. I gained that much weight. It was intense, but like, and now I stay, even in my leanest, I stay at like 136, 135. Mm-hmm. And it's just like salt. And I'm really proud of that. So I don't want people to think like, oh, I need to gain weight.
You thought it was worth it though.
Yeah. Like it was totally, and I held it like, I thought the 145 was a lot just for me myself. Like I felt like I held it more just in my face. Like I had like really like full cheeks, but like I didn't mind it. But I really love being at like where I'm at right now. It's like I can range anywhere from like 130. Right now weighed myself yesterday, I was 138, and I'll go from like 137 up to like almost 140 sometimes. And that's just, and I like that, like in my off season, that like balance, I feel like that's a good place to be. But so
and you got a booty at that point too. Like
yes, I was like kicking back. Like I'm like, how many kickbacks do I have to do? But so this is what I told you earlier when I kind of ramble. So back to my national show, like my national run, I wanted to do one more like local show, and just to kind of get my feet wet again, because I had, the last time was that previous December. And so I asked Shane, I'm like, can I do the June show locally here in Salt Lake? And he's like, yeah. And so I was like pushing hard for it. And he like, I sent him progress pics, and he was like, we're not going to do June. And then I'm like, oh, like he thought I looked like terrible or something. I'm like, oh, okay. And he's like, we're going to do junior nationals the following weekend. And I'm like, what? And he's like, we're just going to skip over June. He's like, I want you to peek into junior nationals instead. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so once again, like I kind of hype myself up. Like, I'm like, I'm going to do terrible. Like, I'm not like, it's going to be the same as USA's and Universe. I'm going to get like sixth place. I'll probably even get lower, like and I was just totally psyching myself out. And Shane, he just, every time I send him progress pics, he's just like, you look insane. Like, we're going to get it, like just keep like, and I'm like, oh, and I don't know why, I was just super nervous about junior nationals. And so we started prepping for that show, and I flew out to Chattanooga, and I ended up, it was the coolest show. Like honestly, that venue, and COVID was like almost done with, like they still had some restrictions like for like planes, but like the shows themselves were like right back to like normal. And that venue, and Sandy is a promoter for that show. I think she's the promoter, and it was beautiful. Like the stage, it felt like a little mini like Arnold or Olympia. Like it was beautiful. And so I ended up getting second. I was one away again from my pro card. I'm like, dang it. And so then and it was like crazy. Like that was probably my favorite look of all time, like so far, just because I was so conditioned. And like they told me when I sent my pics to Sandy, she's like, you were just a little too hard. She's like, but you got to be careful, because if you come in, a lot of girls like kind of get too soft. She's like, there's a balance you have to find. Like you can't just let go and get softer. And so I just decided to try to come in the exact same way, and we were going to do Universe. And that was, I think, 2.5, almost 3 weeks later from junior nationals. And so I'm like, I'm just going to come in the exact same. Me and Shane were like, yep. And then like the morning before the show, we're like, I was going to train the same way. I wasn't going to change anything. And then if we need to maybe like soften up just right before, we'll do that. But so about a week and a half out from Universe, and I was going back to Universe, where it was like my worst placing in my mind, and like the hardest loss that I had. Like I'm like, oh, it's going to happen again. Like I'm going to drop from second place again all the way down to fifth or sixth, like I did last time. Like it was psyching me out. And so like about a week and a half, 2 weeks before Universe, I started feeling this like pain. And my friends who are listening to this are going to just laugh, because like I don't think people realize how hard, like how bad, if you don't hurt your ribs, like how bad they hurt when you do like break them, pop them, like strain them, like they
broken mine too. I know how painful that is.
So that, thank you. Like, so if people don't know, they're like, oh, it's hard for, like so I start feeling this pain in my ribs, and I'm like, oh, that kind of like stings. And this was like, like I said, like a week and a half, 2 weeks out. And I'm like, dang, that like really stings. And I just kept pushing through it, because I just thought it'll go away. It's just like a strained muscle. And some days would be better than other days. And I'm like, dang, like I put my waist trainer on, and it'd actually make it feel better. And I'm like, oh, maybe it's just like needs some time. And so I'd actually wear my waist trainer to work, and while I'm like lifting heavy stuff at work, and I'm like, it'll get better. And then every time I would pose, like, because you have to twist super tight, I'm like, dang, like it was on my left side, and I'm like, this is seriously like starting to hurt. But I didn't, and I'm so glad it worked out this way. Like I'm glad because Universe is where I got my pro card, but like I'm so glad it worked out that way, because if it wouldn't have, I would have always thought to myself, I shouldn't have done it, because it was like dangerous that I was playing with this rib, you know? And so I kept thinking to myself, well, maybe I should let Shane know. Like, I'm like, it doesn't hurt that bad. Like, I'll just keep it to myself. Like, I'm like, it'll heal. Like, I just kept telling myself, like, it'll heal. And so I never told Shane. Like, he never knew that I had, like, I did tell him, I'm like, yeah, I kind of have like a small tweak, but it's nothing serious. He's like, oh, okay. Like, as long as it's not serious. Like, he had no, like, that was my bad. Like, don't, like, just keep it from your coach. Like, I almost knew Universe. Like, I thought maybe I'd lose, but I almost had that like calming feeling. I'm like, I need to go to Universe. Like, I had this feeling like I just have to go. And so I'm like, I can't miss this opportunity. And so I just like kept powering through those ribs, and they, oh my gosh, like for like the next week and a half, like they started hurting so bad. And so then it was even hard to breathe. Like, I was rubbing like any type of CBD oil, any type of like icy hot. I was wrapping it in like icy hot bandages, trying to get those, because I thought it was a muscle that was just maybe pulled, like one of my obliques.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dang, this like really hurts. Like, it was unbearable. And so then I am flying to South Carolina, and I actually had to wear a brace on the plane because it hurt to like breathe. And I'm not condoning this. Like, do not push through. So this is just my like survival.
This is the
story
type of
this
pain you don't push through, but we're here for it. We're
Yeah.
here for this story.
Yeah, this story's insane. Like, I don't condone like if you're hurt, do not just keep like. But it's just I made it more like fulfilling, you know. And so, but when I got to Charleston, it was weird because then it would stop hurting, and then like I'm like, oh well, maybe like it wouldn't stop hurting completely. It was just more bearable, but I couldn't take ibuprofen and Advil. I don't know. Are you familiar with like how it makes you retain water?
No.
So it's like if you take, yeah. So it's one or the other. Tylenol either makes you retain water or it actually takes water out, and then Advil either does the same. I think the Advil, since it's a steroid, it does make you retain water. So like a form, like an NSAID, it's like in a form of a steroid type thing. And so I think it makes you retain a little bit of water. So I couldn't take any. I wasn't sure which one. So I'm like, I can't take either one, you know. And so I wasn't taking any pain meds for it, nothing. And I like the day before the show, I was in my hotel, and oh my gosh, like I'm like this, like I couldn't even take deep breaths, and like they were just like shallow, like super shallow. I could no longer do vacuums. Like, this is insane. Like, this is what I'm saying. Do not push through this. But I like, if you are hurt, it is not like worth it. Just take your time, heal. But I really didn't know how bad it was until I was already like signed up, committed, and going. Like, I had my flight booked and all that. Then it really started like really getting intense. And so I'm like, I can power through it. And so when like the day before the show, I was pose practicing. And when I start to pose, it would make it feel a little bit better. Like, I think it more so just kind of like loosened it up a little bit. And that's when I kind of really told Shane, I'm like, it's pretty bad. And he's like, wait, what? Like, he had no idea. And he's like, what? And I'm like, it's like really bad. I'm like, I can't even breathe. And you could just tell he was like super worried about me. You know, he's like, oh, like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, and I'm like, no, I'm doing this. And so the night before, like when you have to go get your tan, I was just laying in the tent, and like I got butt naked. Like, all the girls had to strip down, you know, the drill, like you just strip down. And I just laid down. Like, I like was facing away from the girls, and I just had to lay on my back because I couldn't breathe anymore. And I'm like, dang, like this. And it wasn't like my whole rib. It was just a section of it that at the beginning, it was just like a section that was hurting. And then it ended up being like the whole inside of my rib that was so tender and so sore. And I was sitting there getting my tan, and I don't know what I had never thought this before. Through all my national shows before, I don't even know what came over me. I don't know if it was just like just another, you know, realm talking to me. I don't know, because I just was getting tanned, and out of nowhere, I just thought, like, I'm getting it tomorrow. Like, I'm getting this, like, not disregarding anyone else, but like, I'm getting this no matter what. I just had that like really calming feeling. Like, there's nothing that is going to stop me. I've pushed through this freaking rib. Like, I am getting this pro card. And so like the next day, like, I think my adrenaline was so amped up because I didn't even feel the pain. And like, I was backstage and I was like pumping up, and I was just so stoked. And one of my friends, his name's Jason, he was working the show, just like the back end of it, lining up all the girls. And I was talking to him, and I'm like, oh, like I was kind of telling him about my rib. I'm like, and then it would set in, and then it would go away. And so I'm like, I don't know, like I was kind of psyching myself out. And then when I got on stage, like I didn't even feel it anymore. Like, my adrenaline was like jacked, and I'm like, oh, just don't even feel this rib pain anymore. And I just like they called me out first callouts and I was splitting center, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, cause it's top two. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm either in first or second. And then I thought from what we were at, like we were staggered. Like when I turned to walk off, I'm like, oh wait, I was in fourth. Like the way like they were counting, I'm like, dang it. And then I just had like a bunch of like emotions. I'm like, I knew I shouldn't have done the show. Like my ribs, cause it was hurting like to suck in. Like it didn't hurt. I had no vacuum anymore. Like the muscles were just giving out. Like there was nothing. And so I'm like, I knew I shouldn't have done the show. And I'm like, dang it. Like I was just crazy. And so when I got off the stage, my friend Jason was sitting there, and he just went pro at Universe the year before. And so I get off the stage and he had this big smile on his face. I'm like, no, it's okay. You don't need, I thought he was just going to be like, you did great. Better luck next time, And he's like, did you just see what you did? And I was like, yeah, I freaking got fourth. Like, I'm like, dang it. And he's like, no, you were splitting center. And I'm like, what? And he's like, you were splitting center. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I start freaking out. But once again, you never know. Like I saw someone at this last show split center and they didn't win their pro card, And so you just never know. And so then I think like it really started setting in like the pain, and I would lay down between finals, and like when we brought all our bags back, and I was laying down on the floor, and my ribs were so intense, the pain. I had to have my friend Gigi pick me up off the ground. Like she had to grab my hands and pull me because I didn't have enough strength like in that spot on my rib to push up off the ground. And I'm like, this is insane. Like it had not hurt that bad up until like that excruciating up until that point. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's all setting in right now. And then when I like got on stage and I'm like, what if I'm third place? And they called out top 5, and they're like, I have top 5 come out. And then like, it's all a blur because I don't remember anything, like I was just in such like a daze. And then they called out the number next to me, and they would have been third place. And then it was just me and the girl who got first. It was just us two left. And I just was like, oh my gosh. And then because I knew I got it at that point.
Yeah,
and I just started like crying, and like the videos, if you zoom in, you can see me, I'm already crying, and like, it was just insane. And so I ended up, to conclude about the ribs, I ended up going to the doctor as soon as I got home, and I had 2 partially dislocated ribs. And then like he's like, your inner obliques are torn as well. And that's how the extent of how bad it was. And so he rolled them. I never heard them like pop back into place or anything, but like he was rolling my ribs, and like it just instantly, like the next day I woke up and it was instantly feeling better and better. It was crazy how fast it got better. Wow. I'm like, I wish I would have done that before, like if I would have known that they were dislocated, I would have maybe tried to like pop them back into place before, and they wouldn't have had that, that much pain. But like I say, I don't condone it. If you are hurt, you go and get it looked at. You don't just like brush it off. It could have cost me that pro card, like it could have cost me, because that was the feedback, was that they had me in first at the very beginning, and then they moved me to second. And the feedback was that I couldn't hold my stomach in as tight, and like she keeps dropping her stomach. And it was because like my ribs were just giving out. And so I'm like, that could have cost me like another chance at my pro card, So I don't, like I say, just go get them checked out. It's okay. Like it's not worth it because I would have wasted it regardless, like wasted the money if I didn't get my pro card, or if I wouldn't have like taken the time and like not done the show. And so it paid off though. Like it was, and I made it more, even though I got second, like I had a friend who got second, and she's like, my competitive side, like I wanted first. And I'm like, I think everyone wants that. Like if you get your pro card at a top 2 show and you get second place, I think everyone wishes they would have gotten first. But I'm like, I would not take it back. Like I would not be like, yeah, I'll wait till the next one. Like I'll take that pro card. I am super happy. Like I was not even about to be like, yeah, I'll wait till I get first, But I was just so stoked. So that show, which at first was the worst national show that I did, ended up being my pro card win show. So it was all worth it in the end.
That is amazing. I love that story of really,
it was incredible. Like
you developed so much resilience and love for the sport, and you pushed through, and even though you wouldn't condone it, it did work out for you, and you knew it was your time, you knew it was your show, which I think is really cool. And I think some people assume like, oh, people just want to win, and all they care about is winning, but something's got to keep you going. And you had moments of doubt and fear and worry and questioning your decision to even step on the stage. So when did you feel you really embodied your best self and saw yourself as a champion?
Well, I think after that show, it was just such like a, because at that point, like I had really wanted my pro card for over a year at that time, you know? So like it wasn't, I just had such a better mindset for that whole year that I was already super proud, and I knew like I could get it. Like even when, like, I think it was too, I do have to give a lot of credit to my coach Shane, because like he didn't like amp me up and, you know, boost my ego and make me like all big headed. He just kind of like instilled in me that like I can do it too. Like he's like, you can do it. And like I think just like and his guidance and always being so level headed with me, and just really someone who I could just talk to. And I do really well with just like black and white, you know, like it is what it is. This is, you do this way, do it this way. You know, I just am good with that. I don't need like the small talk, but like knowing that he was always there to like encourage me and like help me. Like he gave me so like the confidence to keep going. But I think when I realized like, dang, like this is pretty cool. Like it was when I got home from Universe, and my ribs were shot. I was bloating so bad, not only from like all the food I was eating, but like then I started taking the ibuprofen, because once, you know, I can now. And it was like the inflammation was, oh, it was incredible in my ribs. Like it was making me look bloated, and I hadn't even like ate anything yet. And so I didn't even care what I was like, this like watery, bloated mess. And just holding my trophy, like it was just the night when I got home, I'm like, holy freaking crap. Like this is huge. Like it's huge right now. And it was so humbling. Like it did the opposite. Like rather than be like, oh, I'm the best. Like it was so humbling to know, like I freaking just went through how much. And even like the hard points, like that people don't really talk about, like with competing, is how lonely you feel. Like at some points, it has nothing to do with like being alone. It's just like you have to go through so many things by yourself, and like you do start to feel super lonely, and you just have to be more like, okay, you just have to learn to be okay to be by yourself, where it really does like eat you up. And I look back at like the relationships that I had gone through during all my preps and all the hard times, like where you're just like so heartbroken over like a relationship ending, you know, and you're just so sad. And I think about like the only thing that I had to fall back on was competing, even if it was really hard at the time. And it was really hard to like, because everyone knows when you break up with someone and you're all heartbroken, like the last thing you want to do. For me, I can't eat. Like my stomach just is like in a knot, you know, like you want to cry. And like but like knowing that like I had to stick like to my diet, and like I had to go to the gym, and I had to push through like the sadness, and almost like just counting on myself for all that. I look back on all that and I'm like, holy crap. Like even not even just in the last week for peak week for Universe, like this whole journey, now it makes sense, like why I didn't do what I did. Like it wasn't just an instant, like I won it first show, went to nationals, won it first show, you know, like there was a reason why I had so many ups and downs, because every time I had a down, I pushed 10 times harder than I ever had each show, you know. And it's crazy to like look back. I'm like, that's why it happened. And when I see girls doing shows now who they have setbacks, and like they might not get their pro card at the show that they currently did, like I always think like there's a reason, you know, you are about to do something bigger. And the Alexis, I think her full name is Alexis. I see her as Lexi or Lex on Instagram, but she
Redmond?
won the overall. I'm sorry, what?
Lexis Redmond?
I think she won I don't know her last name. She won the overall in wellness for junior nationals.
Oh, wellness.
This last show.
No, I don't
know. Wellness. Oh yeah. So she won, but she had been going back to back. This is totally off the subject of bikini, but she had been going back to back, and she couldn't get her pro card. And then she dug, oh my gosh, she dug so deep and like transformed her posing and her muscles and everything. And then she took overall at junior nationals. And so it was just incredible. Like that's like when I tell people like there's a reason why you didn't get it at this show. It will make you appreciate the win when it does happen. Like my win in Universe was well worth all the ups and downs, all the sadness that I might have felt at certain times, you know, like the letdown of not getting my pro card, dropping down to 5th place. Like I'm like, this was worth every last bit of that like low time, but
Mhm.
yeah, it was just amazing. So amazing. I
That
wouldn't
is
trade. And now
amazing.
I look back, I'm like, I wouldn't trade anything, not one bit of it. I wouldn't make it go faster. I wouldn't skip any. I would just, everything that happened, I'm grateful for every show I've done.
I love that. Like you can appreciate that the entire journey, the ups, the downs, the sideways all contributed to
Yes.
you becoming the athlete that you are. And you even transformed from the beginning, kind of having that social media focus or do it for the gram type of mentality to now really doing this for you and being the athlete you want to be and the champion you want to be. And you went on and you had a similar-ish experience with your pro shows. And I want to be respectful of your
Yes.
time. So we might, I know you've got like 5 minutes. So I just wanted to
If
ask.
it goes on a little bit, if it goes on a little bit longer, you're okay. Sorry, I kind of rambled
Okay.
for a long time.
Okay. But you went on to do 2 pro shows and you had a similar experience where you went and you placed really high, and then the next show you went into last call out. So what impact has that had on you? And maybe how did your past experiences as an amateur influence how you're looking at that experience now?
So it's crazy because I look at it night and day difference now. When I got like not last call, it's when I got fifth and sixth at my national shows, and I was super bummed. I I was not. I was. You always want to get first call outs, but I knew what I was going up against. These girls looked insane. They're all pros. And so when I went into Wasatch, I was expecting second or third call outs. I was totally fine with that because I'm like, these girls are freaking nuts. Like they look insane. They're all like amazing pros. And so I was just content. I'm like, I need to be seen. I need to get feedback. I need to learn, And so when I got to Wasatch and they called my number, I'm like, what? And so I wasn't even like expecting first call outs. And so going into Mile High, I wasn't expecting first call outs at that show either because those girls were heavy hitters at that show. And, but I was like, for that split second when I did get last call outs, like I was just bummed it was weird. It wasn't really like a bum. Like I'm like, dang, I suck, it was just a bummer because you always want to I thought I would place higher just getting sixth place, like I thought I would at least get like second call ups or something, but I instantly it's crazy because I didn't hold on to that at all. Like I wasn't, not even, it's weird. Like I not even longer than like the hour, if that, and I talked to Shane and I'm like, I went right after the pro show. Tyler was waiting backstage talking to all the pros and giving them feedback. And he told me, he's like, you need to bring in your shoulders, you need to bring them up a little bit, and you need to bring your glutes up. And then he's like, and when you turn to the side, you hold your waist out, and that's still like from the ribs. Like I'm still trying to repractice my vacuums and really get those going. And so he's like, you just need to hold your waist in tighter. And it was almost like robotic. Like I'm like, okay, like it wasn't even like, I'm like, dang, he doesn't like this look about me. Like it was just like strictly business. And so
Mhm.
that I think it just had changed so much because now I don't take it as like I'm a failure, I can't do this, I just take it as like, okay, this is what it needs to be, this is what needs to be done. Like, okay, I'll bring it back, and now it's just instantly like even my training, because after um when I got fifth and sixth and I went into an off season, there were some times like where my training like the post show blues, how they say that you get like the post show
Mhm.
blues. And I did have that for a little bit, like, and I didn't even know why, but I just it wasn't like I thought that I was like a failure, but like I had no motivation for like maybe a month. And it was right after my show. And I was just like, what am I doing? Maybe next summer I won't even get my pro card again, but now now that I'm a pro and I can be a pro forever, like I don't think that there's a deadline to get my qualification or losing it, And so when I left Mile High, like I talked to Shane and he was like, yep, he's like, hey, this is what we're going to do. And so I kind of went into like, not a hardcore, like bulking or anything, but like just like a little bit of an off season. Obviously my calories are a lot higher now and like my carbs are up and everything, but I just have a different mindset now. I'm like, just go to work and time to
Yes.
build. And I'm so grateful that I got to that point in competing because like I said years ago, if this same type of feedback, this placing, it would have just ended it for me, you know. Even if I would have gone last call out at one of my national shows, like how I did at my pro show, it probably would have been harder to take than what it was now, you know. Like I don't know why, I took it seriously when they gave me last call outs. I'm like, dang, but like I didn't, and I took their feedback seriously, but I'm not upset about it, because I'm like, these girls are insane, you know. These girls look incredible, and at the pro level, like they all look amazing. So it's like, are you really a loser at that point? Like everyone trains so hard. Are you really like, you know, you're placing the loser, but do you look like a loser? Like, no, like everyone looks top notch right now. So there's got to be a first and a last place, but I got 14th out of 18. So I was center of last call outs, but I'm like, I'll take it. I'll, you know, take whatever I get and just learn from it. So yeah, I lift heavy now, and I'm really building up my glutes. And it's weird because I found that drive again. I was actually talking to Shane. I'm like, I'm almost, in a sense, like without sounding cheesy or, you know, like super generic, like I'm so glad this happened. Like I was telling Shane, I'm like, I am grateful that happened, because I think I needed to level up now that I'm with the pros. Like I couldn't just keep training, like kind of plateauing. I needed to dig even deeper. I've done it every show, like where I've placed lower, like I've dug deeper and deeper. And then when you keep kind of like going at the same pace, like with placing, if you're still doing well, you know, you kind of plateau and you're like, I can just do this today. I'll keep this workout will be good enough. You know, like you really kind of start to do that. And so it just gave me another reason. I told Shane, I'm like, it like fuels me. Like, I don't know. I'm like super excited to like prove, you know, like, okay, like I can build this. I can do this. Like I'll bring it, you know, like you guys want bigger glutes, I'll bring them. Like, so I don't know. I'm just grateful that I'm at that place where it's I think too, the love of it now, and not necessarily like the need to do it all the time. Like, I'm like, I love it just to love it now. And so that has helped a lot, rather than just think I need to do it to stay relevant with other people.
I love that, because I think some people get into the sport maybe seeking that community or relevance or identity, and then they go through the process, and the process actually builds or morphs them or molds them into the person they really probably were seeking to become underneath the surface. Or maybe it guides them to something completely different, non-bodybuilding related, because they realize it's not for them. But like,
exactly,
it seems like your journey has actually really molded you and allowed you to become, or maybe gave you opportunity to become someone who wants the opportunity to be challenged and has proven to herself that she can overcome the odds and eventually win.
Yeah, it's so true. Like that really, that you said it like perfectly, because I told people before, I'm like, I don't think, even though competing, it can be very damaging to people, and I totally respect when people walk away from it if it like hurts their, you know, mental health, or if it gives them like body dysmorphia. Like I totally understand having to step away from it. But I everyone I talk to, I'm like, I would not have gained the confidence that I have in myself, and like just all around, like being happy with myself, being happy with like my look, how I operate, you know, like I don't think I would have gained that confidence if I didn't compete. Like I feel like regardless, if I don't compete forever, if I still plan on competing as long as, you know, I'm willing. And so, but like, it's like, if I ever stop competing, I'll always think like there was a reason why, like I saw that girl at the gym prepping that day, you know, like there was like, I needed that, because everyone has their thing in life that it just makes them like, and I think that since I had been so shy growing up and just didn't want to and be embarrassed, didn't want to like make a fool of myself, it's like I never would have gained that like core confidence. Now I literally, before when I was younger, I would have to look a certain way. I'd have to, if I walked into the gym, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just look at, now I'm like, oh, the confidence I have in myself, not even because I think I look good. Like I just am so content with me, you know, and I would never have found that. I would never, if I didn't compete. And so I'm super grateful for it. And even if that's all I ever get out of it is that, you know, I'm just so glad that I had that come into my life and show me, and like almost like show me that I like something to focus on, and like something that I truly enjoy, and a goal that I love, and I really can focus on. I think that I needed that as well, something that I can look forward to every day rather than just kind of go through the motions, go to work, and which is fine for some people, but I'm like, I always wondered like what it was that I enjoyed. And up until I started lifting hard and competing, I didn't have that. And so I think that really, and then now it's just a part of my life. Like I couldn't imagine, even if I do slow down one day and I take a break from competing, like I'll always go to the gym. I'll always want to help people like with their posing, or go to seminars and go to shows, like I'll always want to do that because I just genuinely enjoy doing that part of it. And so it's just completely, there's a reason why, without sounding cheesy, like everything happens for a reason, how some people hate that. I love the phrase. I love everything happens for a
There's
reason.
a reason it's cliche, right?
Yeah, they think it's very like cliche. And so, but like I love it because I genuinely think like everything happens for a reason, even if you don't realize it at the moment. Like truly, when you look back on it, you're like, oh, okay, like that's why, even if it takes years, And that's when I talk to girls like who are competing and they're going for their pro card. I'm like, it took me 5 national shows, like sometimes it takes a really long time. Some people, they look amazing. They win it in their first show, which is awesome. But like for like the majority of competitors, it takes them a long time to get that pro card. So, and it's usually right before, like right when you want to stop and they're like, this is it. That's usually right when you get it. And so I try to tell the girls, like, just keep pushing for it, even if this is not your show. And I do think that social media does, even if you don't want to think about it, like people, like when you fail, you think everyone in the world's like thinking you're a failure, but really it's crazy how many people, even when I was losing like 5th and 6th and I kept going backwards, I'm like, dang it, like that. And I can't believe how many people reached out to me and said like, your drive, it's like, it keeps me going, me going to the gym. I'm like, I lost. Like, I didn't even, I'm like, hey, I don't even have my pro card. And like, there were so many girls that were like, how you just stick to it, you power through. Like, that's inspiring to me. And so that's I'm like, that's why I didn't get it right then. It's because I needed to better myself and like hear that from other people. I don't know, the whole thing. Like I say, everything happens for a reason. I love the phrase. I use it all the time. So
I do too.
And I truly believe it.
Well, it's perspective, right? Like everyone has their own perspective on things, and you've been able to kind of put the puzzle pieces together working backwards. So to you, you see that everything really fell into place as it was meant to. You held your vision, you kept going, you implement and you focus on what needs to be done, which has now made an impact on many areas of your life because it's changed who you are and how you see yourself.
Yep. I think it's even helped me like because I've always been really close with my family, but when I was competing, I have 4 sisters. We've always all been super close growing up, but I think competing, since it is such a selfish sport and you do have to give up certain things. Like I still made time, like I kind of realized like, wow, I have to like really close in on the amount of people I give extra time to, because I got to still go to the gym. I have to do this, I have to do that. So I think it's also helped me like build better relationships, because my family had been there through me through all of it. And they were so supportive of me, like through every stage of like competing. Even if I were to quit tomorrow, they'd be like, we still love you, And so I just think it's like helped me grow closer with them in a sense too. Like you just appreciate them more because they don't like walk away from you. I've lost friends because of competing, because granted, like it's like I said, it's a selfish sport. So it's not like that I say they just walked away for no reason. Like I was selfish in the sense that like I would just go to the gym rather than go out, like I wouldn't be able to come over all the time because I needed to go do cardio or whatever. And so I lost like a few friends just because of that sense. Like it was all like either our friendship or competing, and I chose competing. And so but like my family has always like stuck by me, and like my really close group of friends have always like, no matter what, even if I get distant, they're there. And so I'm like, I think it's also helped me appreciate like family and friends, really close ones. Like it made me appreciate them more and see how excited they were when I won. Like that was almost if not as cool, if not cooler, to see how excited my family was when I got my pro card. Like my mom was live feeding it at, because I work with my mom like randomly, like, but we work together. And so
Aw.
her and my coworker, it's the three of us, like they were live streaming Universe to watch me. And so like, and then my sisters, they were live streaming it from their house down in Lehigh. Like everyone was just like totally locked in. And so, yeah, I just made me really appreciate my close friends and my family so much more through this. And it made me grow up mentally. Like I used to be kind of like a partier growing up in my early 20s, like hardcore partier. And so it just helped me like grow up and be more calm and, and just be more well-rounded, I think. And I don't know, the whole thing, like I say, I wouldn't be who I am today, not even in the slightest, if I didn't have competing, and if I didn't have, like, even just not the gym. It goes above the gym. Like if I did not start competing, I wouldn't have this moment.
Yes, absolutely. Like you can see how much it's connected you to yourself and therefore to others as well. Because I think when we open ourselves up more to others or more to ourselves, the opposite becomes true too. Like it just allows us to be
Yeah.
more open. And you were giving so much to yourself through bodybuilding. I imagine that also allowed you to receive a lot of that love too.
Yeah. That was hard. Like I do like the one thing, no, I don't really regret that either. Like, cause I've been so dedicated that with dating and all that, like that took a back seat to competing, and I wouldn't change it. I think that I would have like given more people if they just wanted to take me out. Like, but I was so, at the time, like I was so focused on competing that I did not want to even like get distracted by anything. I'm like, nope. Like I was just so like zoned and doing this. I'm like, if I could change one thing, I probably would say, yeah, you can take me out tonight. Like you can take me out to dinner. Like I don't care. But, and I think other people can handle that better. But I just know like how I am with relationships, and I I'm all consuming, and I'm all in when I'm with someone. And so I just knew at the time, I'm like, this is what I need to be about. Like if I want my pro card, I need to be all in on my pro card and my goals, and not even get distracted in the slightest. And so, yeah, it definitely didn't, like, for a minute there, I was just like very like all to by myself for a long time. And I still am, but I'm just more relaxed now. Like I'm like, I feel so much more relaxed now that I'm a pro, and just way content and super humbled. Like I just really grateful. Like when people tag me, even when you ask me to be on this podcast, I'm like, holy freaking crap. Like I'm a brand new pro, and she's like asking me to be
Aw.
on this show. Like I was super stoked. Like just the opportunities that I've gotten from it, even if they're small right now, I'm just really grateful for them. And yeah, it's a different mindset now that you don't feel like you have to chase it, and it just happens organically. It's so much better.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like now you get to almost like enjoy the fruits of your labor. And it's interesting though, you say that you kind of regret it, but you kind of don't. So are you focused on dating now? Like, do you want to update us on that?
No, well, right now I am not, like, I'm open to dating. I haven't like met anyone, that I have wanted to go out on a date with. Like I'll go out casually with friends, guy friends. Like we'll go out on day dates, quote unquote. Like the friend zone day date. No, like I
Oh,
do have like people who will take me out, but I'm not dating anyone exclusively at all. I'm not even really talking to anyone right now. I'm just kind of doing my thing and just waiting. And that was another thing that because I was dating. This is maybe not really, pro talk, but I think all girls can like relate to this. Like when you date the wrong people for so long that you kind of get turned off by the whole thing. Like I was dating just like mean guys for like a long time, and just that just weren't all in, and they would be like players and like playing games and just super toxic relationships. And so, and I think that's another driving force that kind of helped me stay so focused on competing. And that's another reason why I'm so grateful for competing, is because it gave me something that I could totally like control within myself. Like I don't need to stress about it. I don't need to worry about it, because it's just all me. And so I did kind of like step back, but like right now I'm at the point where like I'm totally open to dating, and I'm so picky now with who I want to go out with. And if they even like remotely remind me of like an ex, like I just shut off. I'm like, nope. And I just completely like, sorry, we can still be friends, but no, like I can't date this person. So maybe one day. I think being in Utah and everyone gets married young. Everyone starts having families really young in Utah. And so I'm doing it kind of like the opposite way. Like I'm 31 and I don't have, maybe one day I'll have kids, I'm not sure, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But like, I do feel sometimes I never really feel like it until people ask me about it. Like, oh, you're not married yet. And I don't ever feel weird about it until you start to like be asked. And then you're like, oh, am I like too old to get married? Am I too old to like do this or that? But I'm like, I'm okay with it. When it's supposed to happen, it'll happen for me. And like, I'm so content and have confidence in myself now. That was another thing too, is when I was younger, I would just kind of date anyone because I didn't have that confidence in myself. Like, even if they were rude and they would like belittle me, like I just was like, oh, they're giving me attention, even if it's negative, like you still are getting attention from someone. And so like I represented that in my brain as like, oh, this is like what a relationship is. Like, even if they are rude, like they, whatever. And so I just had no confidence to like walk away from someone. And so now that I am content with just myself and I'm super happy and I'm super confident in myself and like what I want out of like a relationship, I just don't need it anymore. And so I don't need that like person around me all the time and the toxicness, and so I'm like, I'll wait until the right person comes into my life. So yes, I am single right now. And we'll see how long that lasts, maybe another 2 years while I still keep competing, but we'll see.
Well, I think
this is when I tell you.
What?
I tell you when I start to ramble. How I told you earlier, I start to ramble.
Oh, yeah.
This is how it happens.
It's okay. I appreciate the ramble. I want to be respectful of your time. I'm like, I don't know.
Fine. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it's good to like share these things and share this side of it because, I think it's possible, obviously, to have a relationship or find one or date or whatever while competing,
for sure.
but it's like another different beast. Like, it will still take time and energy. And there's things that bodybuilding really adds to our life. And then we have to recognize that. I don't know that I ever like the word sacrifice necessarily. It's kind of growing on me, but not really. I don't know. But there's things that don't come into the top priority list. And for you at the time, it just wasn't in your priority list. And now it's like something you're entertaining or open to. And I love how vulnerable you are with sharing like how you think about like kids and marriage and how where you're at, like your environment plays such a role in that too. Like, you might be judging yourself, but if you were outside of Utah, you'd probably feel very differently. There's a lot of people in California who are not that way. I'm not in Cali anymore, but that was just a random example. But you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's just something that you could not be as judgmental on yourself of if you were somewhere else. So yeah, your environment plays a big role.
When I talk to anyone who is not from Utah, but they're competitors, and it's crazy because I've grown some of like the closest friends through competing, but you also meet some of the most shallow people through competing, which you'd meet them anywhere. You'd meet them like if you were in motocross or, like any type of like, I'm sure everyone has that, like the good and the bad, but I've met some of like my closest friends right now through competing, and they've all told me, because they're all from like out of state, and they're like, you are fine. They're like, we have people here, like everyone here gets married when they're like 35, 36. They're like, if you were somewhere else, you'd be totally content with where you're at. And I'm like, I think that's true. Like, it is crazy how like far behind I feel only like when it gets discussed, like, because everyone does have kids when they're super young in their early 20s, they get married, and it's totally fine if you find that person. But I also think like in competing and just like in general, like I've learned to not try to make something happen, and I've learned to try to not make like a person right for you, because it's just if you can't force something. And I had a tendency to do that, where like red flags were literally thrown at me from every angle, and I would just try to make that person fit what I imagined them being. Like in my mind, they're bad in this way, but they're really nice in this one small way, and so I'd always try to make them right. And that was another thing too with like competing and dating and all that, is it gave me time to heal from like because I've only loved like one person. I thought that I loved multiple people, but I've only ever really like truly been in love with one person. And like, if you don't really face those emotions and you like don't really just like accept them, the bad things, like the good things, but really the bad things that make it not why the reasons why it doesn't work out, and you just kind of either run from it or you run to someone else and try to hide from it. Like, I think competing has helped me face those things without trying to replace them. You know, like you go through the motions and it slowly just gets better. And it's not like you don't have anyone kind of like distracting you, and you're really not over this person. Like, you really are. Like, I was by myself. I had no other choice but to move on from a relationship that didn't work out. You know, like, I just had to accept it and move on. And like, I'm so grateful that I had like the shows to do, because they just helped me in a positive way, just, you know, move on and like get closure from these relationships. And so I do think like that, in a sense, like I take longer to heal from things than maybe some people do, but I just have to fully process the whole relationship, and without having anyone else in it, like without having, because I would always feel like there's been times where like there have been really good guys who have come into my life and I've pushed them away because I wasn't mentally over like the past relationship. And so I would push these good guys away, not because of any other reason, but I just wasn't ready to move on. Like, I still thought about this past person, and it wasn't fair in my mind to lead these guys on, and knowing that I'm not ready for it, you know? And so I think taking a step back and really focusing on me, it might have been a long time. Like, it might have prolonged it, and I might have done it for too long being by myself, and now I'm just used to it now. And I'm like, hey, I kind of like my alone time. But I think that really accepting it without hurting anyone else, without trying to forget them, just really accepting that relationship and focusing on yourself and focusing on your goals, that was like the biggest key too. And that's another thing I don't think a lot of competitors, it gets hard. Like, if you're in a relationship, it's got to be sound, because if it's not, it'll be crazy, because it is such a selfish sport, and you get super moody sometimes, and it's demanding. And yeah, so I've seen a lot of relationships end because one person in the relationship started competing, and the other person, it just didn't work out anymore, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think I recently had someone on who shared an experience with that. And it's strange because you could have a supportive partner and things can also change as you change or evolve as an athlete. And like in this sport where we're always growing or demanding more from ourselves, we need to be with someone who appreciates that as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing too, is that if I ever meet someone, I always go back and forth. I don't know if you're the same way. Like, I always go back and forth. I'm like, I would never want to date someone who would be a bodybuilder. Like, they're so full of themselves. And then I think like maybe I'll date someone who isn't into bodybuilding, but then you kind of realize you don't have a lot in common with someone, because like someone who does it or has done it or like is just in like the gym a lot, they understand that, okay, she does need to go to the gym for this amount of time, and she does need to do her cardio every day. But if you date someone who isn't into it at all, they're like, "Ugh, why do you have to go to the gym again?" Like, it's not really like a lifestyle to them. It's just like a end goal. So it's like, why do you have to keep going? Why do you have to do it today? Why can't you have one, or why can't you eat that? Like, just have one cheat day. And so then I go back and I'm like, well, maybe I would only want to date someone who is into bodybuilding or into the gym. I go back and forth. I'm like, no, I don't want to date anyone that's a bodybuilder. So it just depends on the person, I guess. But it's definitely something that they need to respect you. If they don't compete, they need to understand, because that was a big deal breaker too. At one point I was like, this was a couple of years ago, I was trying to like kind of date around, and I like some of the guys, they would just downplay it. They're like, oh, you going on your little diet, and like they would just almost like not make fun of it, but kind of make fun of it. Like, to them, it wasn't a big deal. So they're like, oh, so you're going to get a plastic trophy. So what? Like, they really didn't care about it. And I'm like, dang, it's like my whole world right now. So this might not work out between us. But you just have to find that person who respects you enough, but also gives you the space. And it is a very, very selfish sport, in a good way and a bad way, and if the way you look at it.
Well, yeah. Yeah. And I think too, it's good to be with someone who lives at least a similar lifestyle, or who can say, I see what you're doing, I respect what you're doing, I support what you're doing, whether or not it affects them. Like they need to be able to see that because it's positively impacting your life, it's important and therefore supports the relationship.
Exactly. And and like you meet people all the time who the husband is full-blown competitor pro and the wife doesn't compete, and they've been together for 20 years, or vice versa. Like my friend Meg, who she's competing right now, she's a pro and she's competing this weekend. Like her husband goes everywhere with her and he doesn't compete, but he still goes to the gym with her when she goes, and he supports her, but I also think it shows the respect too from the competitor, because if it's always just going to be about you, it's hard for someone else to love you, like if you don't ever want to show them any type of affection or love or anything, like if you're super selfish in that sense where you're like, of course they're not going to be supportive of it because it brings out the bad side of you. And maybe that's the point where you just shouldn't be competing. If it brings out all the bad qualities in you, that's maybe not your sport to do. I've seen people who, as soon as they started competing, it brought out like the meanest, like most like selfish, but in a egotistical type of way, it's like, dang, that wasn't that person before they started. I don't know where that person came from, but yeah, it definitely takes, like I said with my friend Meg, like her husband goes everywhere with her. He's there with her right now, like, and he's just her number one fan. And I'm like, you don't even need to compete, but you just need to have that mutual respect and love for each other for it to work like that, and understand how much it takes to be a competitor. It's not just about getting on stage in a bikini and looking good. There's so many sacrifices that go into it. It's insane. I don't even think people realize it until they do a prep and they're like, holy freaking crap. Like that, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to pay for this, you have to pay for that. Like, yeah.
It's a huge commitment and investment. And like, you have to love this because it pays back huge dividends mentally, emotionally, physically, and in life.
Yep.
That's about it. Obviously there's the benefit of the community and you could make a career or you could attempt to, and those things are valuable. That's a longer term game you're playing. So you gotta love it and you gotta find a way to embrace every aspect of it, because if you only embrace when you're on that stage winning and you can't also gracefully lose, or you can't also put on the size necessary to be better the following year, like then you're lacking respect for parts of the process that demand respect in order for you to be better.
Yep, exactly. That's, like you said, if you're only happy when you're winning, and also if you're only happy when you're shredded, that's not what it's about. It's not always just about winning, and it's not always like you can't stay shredded forever. There has to be a point where you need to come down a little bit, or you need to go into a tiny off season to get better, or do whatever you might need to do. And if you're only, your end goal in competing is just looking good for like the picture or the stage or whatever, and that's all you care about, and holding that trophy, it'll be short-lived for sure. So I feel bad when I see like it really does like tear people up, and I get it. Like I was lucky enough to kind of break through that for like early on, and like just like embrace the different stages of it. But I can understand when the beginning of my competing journey, like I can get like if you did lose, or if you did do like something different, or if you didn't look as shredded all the time, or if you didn't post enough pictures, like I could see how it would ruin someone's like their confidence and their mental state. It definitely can put a huge toll on you if you don't do it for the right reasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I also think some people don't know how expensive it is. And I'm not saying this to deter anyone, but like it's even just in food, like that's been one of the biggest things for me, is just the constant meal prepping and the amount of I spend on healthy food, because you can go buy pizza pockets and last you a week, for $10. But when you're eating healthy, I go to the store every 3 to 4 days and buy like a whole new, pack of food to meal prep for the next 3 to 4 days. And that part, definitely the expensive part. It's got to make sure it's something that you genuinely love, and the travel. Oh,
and the coaching.
For COVID, it was nice.
Yeah,
the COVID was super cheap. Everything was like $200 for like a flight, or like $230 for my rental. And then once COVID ended, I'm like, oh, it like it can be very, but anything, I guess, like any hobby that you really truly enjoy. And I don't even like to say hobby, because I don't think that, like, when I think of hobby, I think of like painting or something, but like competing, like, so like intense. I can't just put it into the word like a hobby, like, I think that it's
Yeah.
just so much more than that. But anything that you're really into will be expensive. Whether you're into mountain biking, people spend 15-20 grand on a mountain bike. If
Mhm.
you're really into going to the dunes, like the sandrails and the side by sides, like, they're all super expensive. And so you just, those, anything really, like, anything you're really really into is expensive. You just have to make sure you love it for the right reasons, and then the money doesn't hurt as bad to spend it. Like, you're like, okay, I
Exactly.
don't mind spending the $400 on that plane ticket. It's fine. Like, it's no problem. But yeah.
Yes. And you learn to prioritize according to
Mhm.
what you want to invest in. And sometimes, some people go into different seasons or phases because of that, because they have
Yeah.
the energy to do that. And I think it's important to like be mindful of expenses. I've had a competitor on here one episode, and she like went into severe debt and like really dug a hole for herself, and she pursued
Oh,
her dream, but it's like at what cost. So I think it's
at
always
what cost?
yeah, so like being aware of the investments required for competing, like know what you're getting into. You should be able to ask your coach up front, like, what does my season potentially look like? How much, would a show rate, like you got to do
Exactly.
your research. So, on that note, let me ask you what your best advice is for people who have never competed before but would like to, and then your best advice for people on their road to pro before we wrap up.
So, uh, dang, I always like, I think about it when I'm like on the treadmill or something, and then now that I'm like talking to you, I'm like, mind is blank. But like, for a new competitor, I would definitely ask why. Like, what's your why? What do you want out of this? And it really doesn't have to be set in stone. Like, oh, I want to be a pro. I don't think that you necessarily need to know you want. Like, I didn't know I wanted to be a pro when I first started, but like, you just have to like find your why. And like, a real quick thing, like, there's a girl once who asked me, like, this was years ago, but she wanted to start competing, and I asked her why. Like, what do you want from it? And she's like, oh, I want to make my ex-boyfriend mad. And I'm like,
Mhm.
that's not the reason why. Like, and I just told her, like, you probably shouldn't do this. And like this, because I don't think people understand how hard it is to, like, once you start dieting, if you really want to do well at it, you really can't go eat, like, you really can't go out for the weekend. Like, just, it's so hard. That was the hardest thing at first, was to just give up like the every weekend going out type thing. But like, I think for a new competitor, I would ask them like their why. And then I would also tell them to, like, obviously get a coach if they didn't have one, like a real like competition coach. But I would tell them to like find out everything, like you said, like find out expenses, find out like even your suit prices, find out everything, make sure it makes sense right now, and also make sure you're in the spot like mentally to compete. And if you are super busy at work, if you're super frazzled, if any little thing is like getting to you, it's not the right time to compete.
Mhm.
And just to, and I also would tell like a new competitor to like just enjoy it, because like that newness was so fun to me, that like your first show, like just the whole thing was so fun. And there's no expectations from my first show. Like, I just wanted to see how it was. And so like, no matter where I placed, like, I was super happy. I got third at my first show, but I was just super happy, like, with like the experience. And yeah. And then if I were to tell someone about the road to pro, I would, because granted, they know by this time, if they're trying to get their pro card, they're well aware of like the price, and like the grind of like the going to the gym and all that. But
Mhm.
like, I would probably tell them to like really focus on their stage presence. I would tell them to focus on like truly bringing their best. If they can dig deep, dig deep. If they can dig deeper, keep digging deeper, because those girls, like, you really can't, you never know who's going to show up to the national show. All these girls are first place. I don't know. I think they've changed it now. It's first and second, top two now can
Mhm.
go to nationals, because before they widened it to top five, but now
During
so it's
COVID.
first and second place winners. Yeah. So first and second place winners or overall winners. So these girls are bringing their game, you know, so you got to, if you can dig deeper, keep digging deeper. And I probably tell them to, once again, like enjoy the journey and not get so like, if you're bringing your best, you really don't need to worry about, you're not stressed, you know, like you know, you've done the work, you did everything you could to get to this point. Like just enjoy the moment and like have fun backstage and soak it all in, because I would never go back to nationals. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad I'm past that, but like I do miss I put it in one of my posts the other day. Like I miss like the all or nothing type of energy you get back at a national show in the backstage, because truly everyone's going for that like first or second spot, you know, like at a pro show in my mind, like especially since I'm a new pro, at a pro show, like I knew everyone was like, they're already pros. They're freaking amazing. Like these girls are stacked. Like I didn't really have like that urgency to like be the top, you know. I'm like, these girls have been competing as pros for years. I'm a brand new one. I know I'm going to be at the bottom somewhere. So if I'm lucky to get up at the top, cool. But if not, it's cool. But like when you're backstage at a national show, it's like do or die. Like you want that first or second place spot. And I do miss that, like that energy, like everyone and like you just, it's like a hungry energy. Like you're like, oh man, I need that. I need those first call outs. And so like I do miss that part. But yeah. And one thing that I would tell the girls, and this, like anyone just, and it might be different from, you know, what someone else might say, but nail that first walkout and that pose and that transition. You're like, because when they make you stop, like they'll bring you out in a group of like 4 or 5 or whatever, and nail that. Like I think some people think, oh, I can make up for it later, and you might, and you could. There's no, I'm not saying you can't, but from what I've been told and what I've like learned through it is like that's their first time looking at you. That's like their initial. That's where they start, like they notice you, you know. And if you kind of just like if you don't you really do your poses, or you're not really falling into your poses, like you just get overlooked. And so I always tell girls, I told a girl last week and who's going to nationals, I'm like, that first time you walk out, you freaking hit those poses like your life depended on it, you know, and you take your time and you really like go slow and you make it count. And then you come out for your routine and you work just as hard. But that first initial look when you're walking out, like that's a deal breaker in my eyes. That's when they already know, like, okay, she's someone to look at, you know. So that's one thing I always tell them is just to take your time, really, really nail those poses. But
Totally.
my feedback might be different from others, you know. Like I always think, like when I listen to people, I'm like, man, they're insightful. And then I'm over here, I'm like, just make sure you nail your poses. Like so I just hope that always helped me. Like and that was one thing I would tell myself before I go on stage is I'm like, don't freaking fall. Like you hit that pose, Jackie. Like I would always tell myself, you hit that pose, because I knew like if I didn't give it my all, as soon as those judges were the first time they saw me, I'm like, I could be overlooked. Because my shows, like that I've gone to, my height class was always between G and H. They were freaking stacked. Like there were so many. I think at one there was 32 girls in my height class at a national show. It was insane. And so I just knew, like, I'm like, this is the do or die moment, you know. And I do miss that rush trying to get your pro card. That was insane. It was such an incredible feeling too, to hear your name get called. And then I still have, like, I screenshot like all the little things, like where it says Jackie Cheney IFBB Pro, like they put our scorecard and my name was highlighted. I still have that screenshot and like saved in my phone, like just a little memorabilia.
It's so awesome. That's such a moment that so many girls look forward to and want. Any athlete really who's driven for that wants that moment. And I'm so happy you have that as such a core memory and something you still celebrate. Yes,
I will celebrate that. Oh my gosh, I'll be telling my grandkids about it. Like I'm going to pull out my universe medal. I'm going to be like, look at this. Like look what I got. It's just such a, and it's something that no one can take from you. And it's something that no one gave to you, you know, like you didn't get it from a popularity contest, or you didn't get it from like votes, or, you know, like you earned it. Like there's no one can take that away from you. And it's just such a feeling of like accomplishment. And it is a humbling, like definitely. I think that I'm more humble than I've ever been, and like being a pro than I was when I first started out. When I did my first show as a bikini competitor, and I thought I was like tough shit, and I was like, oh man, I'm the baddest, and like I was had this big, huge head, like being a brand new competitor. And now that I'm a pro, like I'm super humble and just grateful for the experience. And you start to look around and you think that it can be taken away in an instant. And you see, like outside of competing, you see people get hurt, like like life-changing accidents, you know, like that they'll never get back that competing day, or people who like start to develop like a lot of, I've seen some competitors who get like stomach, like digestion issues, and then they like slowly can't compete anymore. I'm like, dang, you just never know like how long you can do it for. And so I'm like, I'm just enjoying it now. Like I'm taking it, but I've seen a lot of people who have like serious injuries and like hurt their knees and their shoulders. And I'm like, I want to enjoy this as long as I can and just soak it all in, and knowing that like, and I think like that was like my ultimate goal at the moment was a pro card. And that was like the highest thing that I had wanted. And I never really looked past that. And so like now that I've like completed that goal and like I have that, like I'm super content with, and like now that I'm competing as a pro, like my ultimate, you don't want to jinx it. You don't want to say like, I think it's bad luck, and I'm not like dogging on anyone. I'm not trying to, but I don't like when people just automatically assume they're going to get qualified for Olympia, like right out the gate, because these pros are insane. And I think some girls are like new pros are insane anyway, and they just get it, you know, but I don't like when people talk about it. Like they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to get that qualification, because like it's super easy to obtain. And so that would be my next goal, would eventually try to get to Olympia one day. But if it takes me years, like I'm okay with that, you know, like it's not like I'm going out there tomorrow, I'm going to get it. Like I know it's going to take me, like I'm at the bottom again. And so like I know I'm going to have to like really work hard and climb for it. But my ultimate goal had been reached, like my pro card. That was my ultimate goal. And so I just feel super, super content with it right now.
I love that. And I think it's awesome that you're just enjoying this, and now you're embarking on your pro journey and you're in it for the long run, which is what matters. And I'm so glad that you came on here to share your experiences and your insights.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Of course. It was my absolute pleasure. Can you let everybody know how they can connect with you?
So on Instagram, I don't have like TikTok or anything, but on Instagram, it's Jackie, Jackie Cheney, Cheney. And that's really the only social media. I have Facebook, but I hardly ever use it. It's more just for like personal family. So everyone, like, if you want to follow me, if not, I'm okay. Like, but if anyone liked my journey and they want to follow me, I'm super, like, I post the most random stuff, like farm life and everything. So, but yeah, that's my IG handle is Jackie Cheney. And that's it. Yeah. There's no other social media form, nothing out there.
Awesome. I will put that in the show notes page, you guys. That's always on celestial.fit/podcast. You can find not just the links, but also episode timestamps, breakdown of all the topics we covered, and a summary of the episode. So it's a great way to see what you can tell your friends to expect when you tell them about the podcast. I really appreciate you guys.
I'm super excited.
Oh, no, me too. I think it's going to be awesome, and appreciate you and all your time. And to everyone listening, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world while you're listening to this episode. Just make it awesome.
Yes. Thank you guys so much for listening. And thank you, Celeste. This was awesome. Like, truly, when you asked me, like, I was so stoked when I saw your message. I'm like, I couldn't believe it. So I'm just honored. Being a brand new pro, like I'm super honored that you asked me. So thank you. And thank you everyone who listened to this episode. And I hope whoever is competing, they get, some good feedback and they keep pushing, and I hope that like my story kind of help people keep pushing to get to their goal, That's
absolutely
the ultimate.
No doubt about it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Celeste.
You're welcome.